We are extremely pleased to have as our speakers today Compuware product managers Irene Ford, Bill Mackey, and Jonathan Manley. With that, I'd now like to welcome and hand things over to Irene.
Good morning. We're pleased that you could join us this morning. There's some very exciting things going on within File-AID this year, and we wanted to share them with you. We're going to begin this morning with a very quick overview of the File-AID family, and then we'll get into more detail on new features and enhancements within each of the products. I will talk about File-AID data privacy and File-AID EX, and Bill Mackey will talk about File-AID MVS and File-AID RDX, and finally we will turn it over to Jonathan Manley to talk about File-AID for IMS and File-AID for DB2. Okay, now certainly everyone knows that File-AID is Compuware's family of data tools, but everyone may not be aware of how much functionality is actually available within the product line. So here on the left-hand side of the slide, we're showing a list of functionality provided by File-AID, and on the right-hand side of the slide, you see a list of the data types that we process. Then in the center of the slide are the products that make up the File-AID family. Each of our products is really designed to act on specific data types. The first three in the list, File-AID MVS, File-AID for DB2, and File-AID for IMS, really provide the data manipulation functions. File-AID Data Solutions is used to selectively change data and provides an engine for data privacy. File-AID RDX extracts and loads related sets of data, and then File-AID EX extends that functionality to distributed data. Both the Compuware Workbench and Topaz, which is Compuware's newest addition to our product family, provide an Eclipse-based interface allowing developers to easily access mainframe data, and Topaz extends that access to distributed data, all of this provided through the same interface. As time goes on, we expect we will be adding more functionality to Topaz as well. We have adopted an agile development methodology here at Compuware, and that really allows us to deliver functionality to you throughout the year rather than waiting for a single yearly release. File-AID 1603 is our progressive release. We first delivered this in July of this year. Now, since this is a progressive release, we will continue to deliver new functionality in October and again in January of 2016. After January, File-AID 1603 will become the classic release and no more new functionality will be introduced. However, maintenance will continue to be delivered for 3 more years. Okay, so now let's take a look at File-AID data privacy and File-AID EX. Since everyone may not be completely familiar with so we're going to look first at the capabilities of File-AID data privacy, and then we're going to look at the enhancements that are new in 1603. File-AID data privacy is really a solution rather than a single product. It is one of the plugins that is available to you within Topaz, and the functionality to actually disguise data is integrated into the other products within the File-AID family. The Topaz interface allows you to define one set of disguise rules and store them into a shared repository. We provide role-based authorizations to control who can view and modify data within the repository. Now, once the rules have been defined, they're used to protect data across the enterprise. So ZOS data, DB2 data, IMS data, and distributed data will all be disguised using the exact same disguise rule. Our data privacy solution is designed to return consistent disguise results. So we normalize data to remove any differences that are attributable to the data type or platform on which the data originates. During our design process, we often talked about processing data based on the human data type. So if a human would think the values are the same, then the disguise results should be the same. When the application of disguise rules is requested by any of the FAIL-AID products, the disguise rules are dynamically created for the exact file being disguised and then applied to each record by the FAIL-AID rules engine. We provide reports and audit trails to allow you to verify that the correct data has been disguised, and also to demonstrate compliance with regulatory rules. To begin the definition for data privacy, you will create a data element for each different item that is to be disguised. So if you wanted to disguise first name, last name, and social security number, you would create 3 different data elements. Then for each of the data elements, you would create source data identifiers, or SDIs, to match the field and column names contained within the metadata of your data sources. These SDIs can be full field names, or they can be field name patterns. Disguise rules are then defined against the data elements and define what actions are to be taken to disguise data. Several disguise techniques are available, including format preserving encryption, translation, aging, and field replacement. Rule logic can also be created to interrogate disguise values at execution time. This next slide is showing a coverage display. And this coverage display really allows the data privacy administrator to preview which rules are going to be applied at execution time. On this slide, we are showing you a FAIL-AID RDX extract and a FAIL-AID EX related extract specification. The application of data privacy rules for mainframe data can be requested from FAIL-AID Data Solutions, FAIL-AID RDX, FAIL-AID for DB2, and FAIL-AID for IMS. I've highlighted FAIL-AID Data Solutions on this slide because it is required for mainframe disguise. And then FAIL-AID EX also shares the use of the same privacy rules to apply that disguise to our distributed data. Okay, now hopefully everyone has a little better understanding of what this privacy solution is all about. Now we're going to look at the enhancements that are new within 1603. We have added support for list variables, and we've also added a couple of new functions. In our earlier releases, we had support for string and number variables, and now we are able to process a list of values for the variable. List variables are available to you in rule logic and also within custom functions. A couple new functions have been added, one to compress white space and one to pad a value on either the left or right. The value will be padded with whatever character or characters you provide out to the length specified. On this next slide, I'm showing a comment rule, which is making use of a comment data element and also several variables. The variables that you see listed in red are private variables that are only used by the comment rule. The variables in green are public variables which are available to all rules. Now on this next slide, you see an example of rule logic making use of our new list variables. On the left-hand side, under original values, you see all of the functions that are available to act on the list variable. So now rule logic can be coded to get and set the entire list of values, or it can add, replace, or insert specific values into the list. Rule logic can also easily check if the list contains a particular value, determine how many values are in the list, or clear the entire list. Rule logic really provides a Java-like expression language where you can code whatever logic is needed to properly disguise your data. Okay, now let's look at a couple more enhancements that are new in 1603. We have added support for the disguise of CLOB and XML columns from both File-AID RDX and File-AID EX. CLOB and XML column support is also available in File-AID EX 532 along with Data Privacy 502. In File-AID EX, we have improved the processing of distinct data types. They will now be disguised based on the underlying data type. Support for connecting to Oracle databases using a service name has also been added to File-AID EX. And we've added a couple of new utilities, one for data privacy and one for EX. The data privacy utility will now allow you to clone a data privacy project, including importing of SDIs, and the File-AID EX utility will now allow you to generate Converter Pro specifications based on table definitions within a DB. And these specifications, which are generated, can include the request to apply data privacy rules. Okay, so now at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Bill Mackey to continue on with File-AID, MVS, and RDX enhancements.
Thanks, Irene. With Release 1603, we made a number of enhancements to the File-AID, MVS, and RDX products, 19 of them to be exact. Due to time issues, I'm going to be discussing 3 of them that I feel will be beneficial to a lot of our File-AID users. Those are going to be 64-bit memory browse and edit, which we're also calling the removal of windowed editing. Compare enhancements targeted to allow File-AID customers to replace other vendors' compare utilities. And finally, multi-file support within option 3.6, our search update options. So let's take a look. First, a brief history of windowed browse and edit. Many years ago, customers started requesting a way to edit very large files. Technology limited us on what we could fit into memory, so we came up with a solution that involved just reading the necessary amount of records into memory. And we called this windowed browse and edit. This technique brought about several restrictions, though, one of those restrictions being that we were limiting the file types that we were supporting. So technology has progressed and file types and file sizes have grown. In the 1603, we're getting rid of windowed editing and taking advantage of 64-bit memory. Many of the previous restrictions are now lifted, including file type access. For example, we can now access very large ESDS, RRDS, and PDS file types. Let's show you some differences. Notice in this chart that I have 3 columns of file types across the top, the KSDS, sequential, and then some other file types. And down the sides, I have some commonly used edit commands. For KSDS large files, the removal of windowed editing and the use of 64-bit memory removes restrictions and makes it look a lot more like standard editing of a smaller file does. And for sequential files, 64-bit memory removes all sorts of restrictions, and that allows us to perform the commands listed on the chart. And finally, for other large file types, we now support them where before we couldn't even edit or browse them at all if they were large. There's a few other frequently used commands that now work the same regardless of the file type. So let's take a look at the product for a comparison. Okay. So I'm going to start by going into the 10.2 release of File-AID, which is our current classic release, and kind of show you what the windowed editing currently looks like in case you haven't had the privilege. We're going to go into option 2, edit of the product, and I'm going to edit a file called seq.large file. This is a large sequential file. When I hit enter here, I get a pop-up window. It's kind of difficult to read, and it tells me that this is a candidate for windowed editing, and asks me what I want to do, and it gives me some options to select from. So if I try to edit this file, I will get a message back that says insufficient memory. So another option is to select option 2 for windowed editing. And when I do that, it allows me to edit the file, but it brings me into a screen that looks a little bit more like Browse, actually, where I don't have any line numbers down the left-hand side of the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some labels .a and .b in this file and do some other commands that just to show you some differences here. So for example, if I do a find command on the word OBERT within that range for all, I get a message back that says that that line range is invalid and it's not supported in Windows mode. So these are just some of the restrictions that we see. And the same thing for change. I try to do a change all within that range. That's also invalid. So let's take a look at 16.3 now. I've backed out to the primary option menu. We'll go back into edit on the very same file, my large sequential file. This time when I hit enter, we don't get all the verbiage in the written writer. We're going to go right into an edit mode that looks exactly like standard edit looks. The only thing to point out, if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, this is how you'll know that you've entered this 64-bit memory. It's going to give you a little message saying that you're now using 64-bit memory. If I look at some commands, I put in my line labels here. I'm going to do a change command where we're going to change OBERT to EBRT in that range. And it works just like you'd think it is. It tells us how many were changed, how many times on each row. Okay, so that's one of our enhancements. I'm going to move on to option 10 of the product, compare. And I'm going to illustrate 2 of the compare enhancements that we've added to 1603 to help customers replace a leading vendor's compare tool. There were other Compuware enhancements, but these 2 are the most impactful in allowing customers to replace vendor tools. So those 2 enhancements I'm going to show you are Compare now provides a new standard report option to reduce the total number of lines in an unformatted compare. What we've done is we've removed blank lines and duplicate information to make the report more concise. Really helpful when we've got large comparisons. And then for unformatted compare, fields can now be chosen for compare implicitly by excluding non-compare fields. This makes compare easier to use when only a few fields are non-compare. Let's look at examples. First of all, we're going to do an unformatted compare. I'm going to give it the name of the file that I want to compare, the old file, and the file I'm going to compare it against. Now, these are both the same size files. The files, I'm going to do this online, set up some criteria, and we're going to modify the print defaults so I can see my print defaults. And we're going to choose to show changed, inserted, deleted, matched records in a character mode. Now, here's where some of the changes take place. We're going to use a standard report option, and if you notice the second line there where it says old new print sequence, we're going to initially show you in release 10.2 using alternating, but there's also an option there, option R for reduced. This is the new option. I'm going to show you that in a second. Let's look at how it looks currently. In my case, I'm going to compare the entire record, all 450 bytes, and I'm going to synchronize on the first 5 bytes as the key. Since it's a sequential file, we're going to tell it to use the first 5 bytes as the sync key. And this is what a report looks like. Basically, this first record is a matched record. You can see that we show you the old file record. In this case, my records are broken up into 100-byte chunks, and you'll notice that there's a space between each of those 100-byte chunks. So these spaces are actually real estate that we can get back with our new report. We'll show you that in a second. This is what a matched record looks like. If I scroll down a little bit in the report, we'll take a look at a changed record. So in the changed record, we show you both the old and the new record, and then we actually point out which 100-byte chunks are changing. So in this first 100-byte chunk, you look out in position 35, you'll see the old record's got Hillywood and the new has got Hollywood. But the rest of the 100-byte chunks, 101 through 200 and so forth, have no changes, and yet we're going to be showing you all of that data, both old and new, with spaces. So there's some real estate there that we can get back to, and we'll show you that in a second. Scroll down to an inserted record. I'm going to show you the entire inserted record since it's a new record. And you'll also notice that in between the 100-byte chunks, we've got a space. Let's take a look at what it's going to look like. Well, first of all, this is if I scroll down to the bottom, you can see that I've only compared 4 records from each file. So it's a very small compare. And you can see that the size of the report, it's got about 168 lines in this report, which is no big deal for 4 records. But imagine if you were comparing 4 million or 40 million, how big this report would be and how long it would take to generate and actually scroll through it. So let's take a look at what the new reduced print sequence looks like. So the only thing I'm going to change is change the A to an R for reduced in standard edit. This time what you're going to see is here's a matched record. And you'll see that we're showing the same 100-byte chunks. And since it's a matched record, we're just showing you the old record, and we've taken away the spaces. See there. Scroll down and show you a changed record. In the changed record, since the change occurred here within bytes 1 through 100, we show you both the old and the new record, all 100 bytes, and we underline out in position 35 the one line that the parts that are different, changed. And then for the rest of the data, we just say both. The rest of this data is the same for the old and the new, so we don't need to show it to you twice. We can get rid of the spaces as well. Let's scroll down to an inserted and deleted record. And you can see here what we've essentially done is taken away the spaces between the 100-byte records. If I scroll to the bottom this time for the same 4 records, my report is now about 115 records long versus the 167. So saving those 50 or so lines, and that's just with 4 records being compared. If we had 4 million or 100 million, you can kind of do the math. We're going to be making this incredibly smaller. So that's the enhancement that we added there. Okay. Second enhancement we're going to be talking about is what we call exclude processing. I'm going to go into a report format again, character mode. This time I'm only going to be showing changed and matched records. Put our report style in here. I'm going to use grouped. And here's where we're going to put in our comparisons. In this case, I'm in release 10.2, and in this particular example, I don't want to include certain bytes in the compare because I'm expecting those to be different. So I want to exclude positions 35, positions 210 through 212, and positions 410 through 412. So there's three areas of this 450 byte record that I don't want to compare. And the way compare works now is I've got to go through with a cline command and tell it what to compare, what to explicitly compare. So I tell it to look in position 1 for a length of 34 bytes. And then since I don't want to do position 35, I say, okay, start in position 36, compare that. But I know I don't want to compare positions 210 through 212, so I've got to do some math to figure out the length after position 36. I've got to subtract, so I think it's 214 minus 36, and I get 174, something to that effect to get my length. And then I've got to say, okay, now start in position 213 and do some more math because I don't want to do bytes 410 through 412 until it's a length of 197. And finally, position 413 for a length of 37. That's the data that I want to compare. That's lots of math. Now, if you enjoy solving dumps without admin days, then this may be how you enjoy doing compare. That's not me. Let's take a look at the enhancement. And the new way of doing it, it allows me to exclude, if I prefer, rather than having to do inclusive compares. So I can use the X-line command and just say, exclude position 35 for a length of 1, exclude position 210 for a length of 3, and exclude position 410 for a length of 3. That's it. So this is the exact same comparison. That's my kind of math. This is what the compare looks like. This is a matched record because out here in position 210, where it says old file and new file, we've excluded those positions so that it's still considered a match. Okay. I'm going to move on to the final enhancement, that's in Search Update. Currently in option 3.6, Search Update, it allows me to search and update a data set, including the capability to search and update across all or selected members of the PDS or PDSE. And this is great, but our customers have asked us to expand the capability to multiple data sets simultaneously. Let me show you what that's going to look like. We'll start by doing a browse, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to browse all the data sets under my ID that start with FASAMP by using a wildcard. Hit enter. And in this particular case, what I want to do is I want to search my source layouts for a specific field that I want to change. In my case, a field named Side A. So I can go into my copybooks, my layouts, by selecting it and putting my criteria. But what if I've got more than one source library? If you look at my first two data sets, FASAMP, COB source, and COB source old, I can only do one at a time. So when I select layouts and hit enter, it then allows me to put in my criteria to search. And that's great, but I've got to now go back and do it another 2 times if I want to search the other 2 source libraries. And if I've got lots more than that, then I've got to repeat this several times. So now I'm going to go into, and that was release 10.1 I was showing there. I'm going to now go into 16.3, and I'm going to do a different scenario. I'm going to go into update on the same FASAMP.asterisk set of files. And this time when I come in, you'll notice that I can do block selects and single selects. I'm going to select about 10 different files at once. Some of these are sequential files, some are copybooks, some are JCL, some are source libraries, some are VSAM files. I'll select whatever files I want, hit enter, and I can then come back and exclude anything from what I've selected just by doing an X. Here are the files that I now want to perform my update to. But now if I've selected any PDFs, it's going to give me the option to actually see the members within each and every PDF. So if I say yes to display member select list, it'll then show me a list of all the members in each and every one of my PDSs. So I can select or deselect members there. Here we're going to do this. I can do some selection criteria here. We're just going to do them all. And in this case, what I want to do is I want to change some area codes. What I'm telling you here is look in position 179 for every record of all the members and all the files, and look for the value of 408 and replace it with 917. At the same time, look in position 189 for 408 and change it to 917. And when I apply this, it'll actually show me file by file what type of file it is, how it was opened, what the length and the keys are, and then it'll show me all the records that are going to change, and I can scroll around and see the changes. And I can scroll down. It gives me some information here. In this case, I had 9 input data sets. 3 of them had hits and were selected. I had 1 error data set. I had no empty data sets. It tells me how many records it read and how many listed with how many changes. Scroll down and see the other files. And I can also see my error report where it shows me that this particular linear data set is invalid for update. And it shows me that there so that I'm not confused as to why I didn't use that file. I can here's where I can choose to perform the update or not, or print out the changes. We're done. Now within option, if I go back to my source member, once again, this time, instead of just selecting the one layout, I could select the other 2 copy lives at the same time and then apply my unformatted selection criteria to it. This is what it looks like. It shows me how many data sets were selected, how many records were read, how many are going to make the change. So those are the enhancements made to File-AID, and I'm going to pass it over to Jonathan Manley.
Good morning. I'm Jonathan Manley, the Product Manager of File-AID IMS and File-AID for DB2. And in Release 1603, the changes have been primarily driven by custom enhancement requests and user feedback. The changes can be broken down into 3 distinct areas: installation and customization, features and functionality, and architectural changes. Looking first at installation and customization. We've added capabilities as well as enhancing usability. FAMVS for DB2 added a capability to control parallelism in DB2 on a subsystem-by-subsystem basis. Enhancement has been requested by customers who wanted to be able to restrict CPU spikes in certain environments if users were executing complex SQL statements under FAMVS for DB2. The change has been implemented through a new configuration parameter associated with the DB2 subsystem configuration that directs FAMVS for DB2 to set current degree to 1 or any for the nominated DB2 subsystem. This allows parallelism to be set on and off for a specific DB2 subsystem. In prior releases, there was a PTF that was available which would set current degree processing product-wide. This PTF has now been replaced by this new configuration option that sets current degree by subsystem. FAMVS for IMS configuration has also been changed to enhance usability based on feedback from users to allow the installer to bypass dataset validation during configuration. In the past, FAMVS for IMS would check the datasets entered on the configuration panels existed and would flag any missing datasets as an error. This meant there were challenges if the installer wanted to do the configuration in one environment where perhaps not all the target IMS systems were present, with a view to pushing the configured products to different environments for later execution. With the new bypass dataset validation flag set, FAMVS for IMS will not check the presence of the named datasets, making it easier to configure in one environment for execution in another. 1603 also added health checks for IBM's Health Checker for the ZOS utility. Before we look at the checks we've added, let me spend a moment introducing IBM's Health Checker for ZOS for those who may not be familiar with it. The Health Checker for ZOS has been available as a base function starting with ZOS version 1.7, and it provides a framework to help simplify and automate the identification of potential configuration problems before they have an impact. This is implemented through a combination of the health check framework, which manages the scheduling and running of the checks, and the individual health checks themselves that identify what's to be checked and pass the information back to the framework regarding the results of the check. The checks are independent of the framework and can be written by anyone, such as IBM, independent software vendors, or end users. Compuware has added a number of initial health checks across the whole range of Compuware product families in response to customer requests, asking that we provide visibility to the Compuware tools within the IBM Health Checker for ZOS framework. We will continue to add additional checks over time as needed or requested. For today, though, I'm discussing just the checks that have been added for FAMVS. FAMVS has added 5 checks, some focused around specific components and others that are shared with a focus around the technology. For the FAMVS family generically, there is a check to check that the execution datasets required to run FAMVS exist and are available. For FAMVS RDX, 2 checks have been provided. One checks FAMVS RDX configuration parameters look good, and the other checks that the configuration modules needed to run FAMVS RDX exist and are available. For the FAMVS components that access DB2, a check has been added that checks FAMVS DB2 subsystem configuration and reports on the DB2 subsystem status and availability for the configured subsystems. It also checks that the FAMVS plans are bound and are available. For the FAMVS components that access IMS, a check has been added that checks IMS configuration and reports on the configured IMS system availability. As an example, this shows the type of information that comes out from the DB2 subsystem configuration check. It shows the subsystem configured as the FAMVS default, and for each configured subsystem, confirms the status of the datasets needed to use the subsystem. The report also documents for each subsystem the status of the FAMVS plan. To summarize, the Compuware health checks have been added based on feedback from customers who wanted to have visibility of the Compuware tools in the IBM Health Checker. The checks are designed primarily to cover 2 areas: product operability, so basically check that the products run, and performance, to evaluate configuration settings against environment and make recommendations. It's all about trying to improve user experience by catching issues or potential issues before the users. Over time, we intend to add additional health checks as needed, but please feel free to provide feedback on what checks you would like to see. We've taken a look at what's changed in the installation and customization. The second area 603 touched on was features and functionality. For FAMVS DB2, we've improved usability by adding a point and shoot to a number of panels based on customer feedback. In prior releases, there were a number of screens that required the users to type commands on the command line in order to progress the tasks they were trying to accomplish, such as going into edit with selection criteria. Let's look at an example. Here we're going to go into edit and select option 2 from the primary option menu, identifying the table we want to edit and specifying T for temporary selection criteria. This is where the user enters the selection criteria they want to be applied to the edit session, and once the criteria has been fully defined, in prior releases, the user would have needed to go to the command line and type one of the listed commands, such as exec or SQL, or have the command assigned to a PF key in order to proceed to the next screen. Now with the convenience of point and shoot, the user can just position the cursor on the command and press enter to initiate the command. Here I've placed the cursor on the exec command, and when I press enter, the command is executed. And I'm taken into the edit session with the result of our selection. There are a number of places across FAMVS for DB2 where we've been able to utilize the point and shoot in an effort to improve user experience. Of course, you do not have to use the point and shoot if you prefer typing in the commands. Under FAMVS for DB2's object administration, we've updated the show DSNZ palms command to reflect the parameters for DB2 version 11. And we also implemented an enhancements request to bring the ability to bind and rebind plans into object administration facilities. To get to these, we go to option 3.1, Objects Administration. We indicate we want to work with plans. And at the end of the list, we now see the new bind option, which when chosen presents the user with the bind options which can be executed online or in batch. Alternatively, if we're working with existing plans, we can issue the new rebind command to generate the rebinds of one or more plans, again, either online or batch. The final FAMVS DB2 functionality list here is a usability item that improves the way FAMVS for DB2 helps migrate the FAMVS DB2 explain tables used in SQL analysis to higher levels of DB2. In prior releases, users were directed to run manual steps to bring the explain tables up to date. With the new dialog, the user is prompted when needed to migrate the explain tables, which is done in two parts. The first part alters the existing explain tables, which once the user confirms is okay by pressing enter, will be done. The second part, JCL, is generated, which enables the legacy explain data to be migrated so it can be reviewed in the altered explain tables. This is done in batch, as there may be quite a lot of data to migrate, potentially. At this point, the user can submit the job. If they didn't want to run this now, they can exit, and later the JCL can be recreated. To recreate the JCL, if the job wasn't run, then we can just go into option 4.0 from the main menu, and there we see the option to regenerate the JCL. So to summarize, for FAMVS for DB2's features and functionality, we've added ISPF point and shoot and the prompted explain table migration to enhance usability, and added new capabilities to the FAMVS for DB2 objects administration. For FAMVS for IMS's features and functionality, we've added new capabilities as a result of customer enhancement requests. The first is the new R database load option. This enhances the load processing by allowing the user to load data from previously run extract at a database record level. I'll explain more about that in a minute. First, let me put some context around the extract and load processing. On the extract side, the data is extracted from the driving database, probably driven either by selection criteria or key lists contained in an external file. And as part of the extract, FAMVS for IMS will chase relationships across both IMS logically related databases and application related databases. So at the end of the extract, a sequential file will contain all of the data that has been extracted from the driving database, as well as all of the related databases to satisfy the IMS logical and application defined relationships. On the load side, we take the sequential file and load the target databases with all of the data that has been extracted. So going to File-AID primary option menu, I choose option 4 for extract and load. And for the purposes of today, I'm assuming I've already run an extract and now looking to do the load. I identify the sequential file used as the output of the extract and choose how I want the data to be loaded. In prior releases, we had 3 choices: L for load and initialize, I for insert segments only, and U for update and insert segments. For load and initialize, we insert the data coming in from the sequential file into an empty, uninitialized database. For insert only, we read segments coming from the sequential file and insert them into the database. If the segment already exists, we read the next segment from the sequential file and try and insert that. For option U, the update and insert, we read segments from the extract dataset and try to insert them. If the segment already exists, then we perform an update on the segment with the image coming from the extract dataset. What the U option does not address is the case where you have child segments contained within a given database record that are not present in the extract dataset. After a U option load, the root and any child segments coming from the extract dataset will have been inserted or updated, but any child segments in the target database that were not present in the extract dataset will remain. The new R option is designed to address this by, in effect, deleting the root segment and its dependence in the target database prior to inserting the root, child, and related segments coming from the extract dataset. This can be an effective way of reinstating nominated database records back to an extracted state. So here I select the new option R. Identify my target database or databases if there are IMS logical and/or application-related databases present, as in this case, and submit my load. Once the load is run, I can review the output. I see the counts of the inserted segments across all of the linked databases that were loaded, and if I scroll right, I also see the counts of the segments that were deleted from the database as part of the R mode processing. Going back to the R load mode JCL, I want to draw your attention to the IXP del DD. This is there as a safety net. During the R mode processing, File-AID writes segments being deleted from the target database to the IXP del dataset. So if after an R load mode, we have an oops moment where we realize we've deleted something we shouldn't have, we can then recover from this by doing another load using the IXP del dataset as the input. To do this, we name the IXP del dataset as our from dataset, and then we can either use the insert only to add the missing segments or another R mode to restore the database records back to their preloaded state. The other customer requested capability we added was the ability to use the where invalid syntax in File-AID for IMS flex jobs to locate data that does not match its COBOL or P1 definitions. For example, spaces in a packed field, or put another way, a data exception candidate. For those of you who may not be familiar with the flex part of File-AID for IMS, it's in essence a batch utility with control cards that allows you to manipulate IMS via insert, change, or delete commands. Print segments or nominated fields within segments, count segments, extract keys of segments that meet defined criteria, or extract one or more fields from segments, all in batch. So what we've added with the where invalid syntax is to allow users for all of the flex functions to locate segments where the named fields contain invalid data, like spaces in what should be a packed field. This is great in production support capacity, where you may need to correct bad data across a large number of segments, or alternatively use it proactively to highlight data exceptions waiting to happen. To use this, I go to the flex from the menu, and then I first need to generate my command statements. This is what I prepared earlier. And as we can see from the syntax here, what I'm doing is I'm selecting the order 10 segments where the field actual ordered quantity contains invalid data. So I'm looking for fields that don't contain data that matches their COBOL or P1 definitions. And the segments that meet that condition, I want to update the data from the bad data to be the value 1. So I've now built my control cards to do that. The next part is to build the JCL. I point to the control cards that I've created, identify the datasets that are for the database I want to process, and I submit my job. So once the job's completed, I go and look at the output, and I can see from the statistics that we retrieved 7 segments, and of those 7 segments, 3 were qualified, meaning that they contained invalid data, and 3 segments were changed. So those are the segments that contained the bad data. Scrolling further into the output, we see the details of the segments changed and the before and after values. So at the bottom of the screen here, we can see the hex 40 is representing the spaces, and on the right, we see the value 1, which is the data that's been changed. To summarize the File-AID for IMS features and functionality, we've added new capabilities with the R-Load mode option to process the loading of data at the database record level, and also introduced the ability to locate bad data with the flex with where valid. We've now seen the changes made to the installation, customization, the features and functionality. The third area we focused on in 16.3 was some architectural changes, in effect the bits behind the scenes. In File-AID for DB2, we addressed 2 areas. The first was memory management in the SQL analysis feature. With the changes we made, SQL analysis use of memory is greatly improved, meaning that users are able to analyze much more complex SQL and many more SQL statements in a given amount of memory. The second area of change was the usage of ZOS Unix. In prior releases, in order to use Browse and Edit, users needed to have an FAMVS segment defined. With 16.03, this is no longer the case for Browse and Edit. So in summary, before we open the floor to questions, File-AID for IMS and File-AID DB2 Release 16.3 focus on 3 areas: installation and customization, which aim to improve product validation, simplification, and flexibility; features and functionality, which took the steer from customer enhancement requests and feedback; and architecture, which provides behind-the-scenes improvements. Speaking for all the product managers, we're keen to hear from you with your ideas and suggestions as to how the products can work better for you, whether this be enhancements to existing functionality, new capabilities. Please help us drive our direction. The products are really there for you, and we really do want to hear from you. Thank you for your attention this morning. Let's now open the floor for any questions. Irene, have any questions come in so far?
Hi, Jonathan. Yes, actually, we have several questions. The first one I'm going to direct to Bill. There are 2 questions regarding 64-bit edit. Someone wants to know whether 64-bit memory is going to be the default edit mode in 16.03, or do we have to set up some special options? And a related question is, do we have to do anything unusual to the TSO region size to make use of 64-bit edit? Bill, can you handle those questions?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Irene. Yeah, you shouldn't have to do anything unusual or anything different. We kind of will look at the file when you bring it in, kind of like we do for window editing, and then we'll place it where it belongs. I think over time we'll probably be putting everything in 64-bit, but initially we'll just because there's a lot more memory typically in the 64-bit above the bar space than there is below. So you won't have to do anything different. Depending on how large your file is, you may want to use selection criteria. We're obviously limited to the amount of memory you have above the bar, just like we are below the bar currently.
Okay.
That answers the question.
Makes sense. Thanks, Bill. Next, I have a couple of questions about data privacy. One question asks whether the data privacy functions in File-AID Data Solutions in File-AID EX will continue to exist outside of Topaz. And a related question asks if File-AID data privacy is different than creating disguise criteria in File-AID Data Solutions. So the answer is yes, it is different. When we create disguise criteria in File-AID Data Solutions or in File-AID EX, we are creating disguise rules which are specific to a particular field on a particular object. We call those embedded privacy rules. When we create disguise rules from the Topaz interface, we are creating dynamic privacy rules. Dynamic privacy rules are created once and apply to all the instances of data which are identified by the data element. So with the dynamic rules, you create the data element in rule once. With embedded rules, you create it for each and every instance of the data. Now, we will continue to support embedded privacy rules, so anything that you have created to date will continue to function just as it always did. It is not our intention to drop support for embedded rules. We are simply providing you with an easier to manage alternative, which is our dynamic privacy rules. Okay, now I had another question, which I think will also go to you, Bill. Are there any other changes in File-AID RDX?
Yes, unfortunately I didn't have a whole lot of time to go through RDX, but there were several changes in File-AID RDX in 16.3. Support for extended dataset processing is now in there. We did several performance improvements to make it run more efficiently and faster. There's CLOB XML support now. I think Irene mentioned it in data privacy, but on RDX supports that. And then with the ability to provide file suffix qualifiers is also in there. Those are the ones that off the top of my head I can think of for 16.3 RDX.
Okay, excellent. Now I have another question. Does Topaz replace the workbench? Topaz includes all of the functionality that has been available in the workbench. So all workbench functionality is available in Topaz, but Topaz also includes functionality beyond what is available in the workbench. For example, the ability to edit distributed data, to do cross-LPAR copy, and to view relationships through the relationship visualizer are only available within Topaz and not within the workbench. Let's see what else we have here. Bill, here's another one on Compare. Are there any other Compare enhancements which would help to replace other Compare products?
Yeah, there were several other enhancements, and these changes that we applied to 16.3 came from direct customer input. But the other enhancement include using SMS settings when allocating criteria data sets. Apparently, some of the temporary files and the criteria data sets that we were allocating were getting erased and wiped off the system by nightly. So we can use your SMS settings. We now provide a way to essentially override compare criteria in your JCL, so allowing for quick modifications of your criteria in your compare jobs. And compares will allow the user to work with layouts containing more than 9,999 fields, and we're going to be continuing to work with our customers. So those enhancements are either in 16.3 already or will be by January 1st when it becomes the classic release. Irene?
Okay, let's see what we've got here. There's a question here about can I receive a copy of today's presentation?
We will be making the presentation as well as a replay of this broadcast available when the file is ready. And unfortunately with that, we are running out of time. We apologize if we were unable to get to all the questions that were submitted. We will, however, reach out directly after this broadcast. Again, we encourage you to fill out the short survey at the end of the broadcast to be entered to win an American Express $50 gift card. And with that, we thank you for attending the webcast. This concludes today's presentation. Have a great day.